Hello and welcome to a Circuits and Boards video game review. On the docket today we have Animal Crossing for the Nintendo Switch, just recently came out. What we like to do here on this channel for Circuits and Boards is we review content usually in a video game or tabletop construct, break it down into 5 major categories for the video game side, that being immersion, graphics, entertainment, content, and gameplay. Also with the video versions of the review versus the written versions. I like to do an additional category, that being the value of the game, how much a price point would be no matter what the game overall rating gets. It deserves to be bought just simply based on if you can get it for a deal or not. So let's jump right into it. So this game is a very interesting game. To preface what this game is about and to basically add a little bit of a disclaimer or asterisk in front of it, this game is not for everyone by any means. It's a decent game overall, definitely entertaining game overall, but it's just not for everyone. There's plenty of memes, plenty of jokes going around to show how this game is basically Nintendo turning around and selling you a chores video game. It's very, grinding is not the word, but it's very intensive in the sense of you create your own content. You create your own enjoyment out of the game. It's very, very sandboxy. It's very, very open to creativity, which is great if you're creative, which is great if you just want a relaxing game. It's also great if it's just an open game where you don't feel pressured to do a storyline, you don't feel pressured to perform at a skill-based, whether that be like a first-person shooter or an RTS. It's nothing like that. It's definitely a casual game. And it's just basically chores. Going around, building the island that you're stuck on or that you're placed on, collecting resources, using those to build up any kind of material that you want or any kind of structure that you want. Kind of a mix between Minecraft and Sims, to where you can control your own character, you do activities throughout the day. It's just not as developed as Minecraft would be in the sense of content, but it's definitely a very laid-back game in that category, in that scale. So jumping right into the first category, to give a little bit of better context, we have immersion, that being the sense of being inside the game. That's one of those things of where if immersion is not a major element that's focused on, I kind of lose interest in the game. This is definitely a personal preference for me. I don't think it's anything that necessarily makes or breaks the game, but it's definitely an important factor for me. If something's not immersive, if I can't get involved in it, if I can't get behind it, then I usually just drop the game and I can't get back into it either. So immersion for this one, I gave it an 8 out of 10. It definitely above average on immersion. I definitely get into the characters that I'm talking to. I definitely get into the whole role of, paying back Nook, which is one of the major characters. I definitely get into creating a home for myself. Definitely get into landscaping and basically terraforming the island in how I'd like it to look. There's even some videos that I've seen of this game to where people actually make their island look like other games, Pokemon to be specific. It's amazing how they pull that off. I'm by no means that creative. I'm just kind of taking what I can and making it look as good as I possibly can with the materials that I'm given. Not really having an idea or a plan in mind, just kind of placing things where I think looks good, and then kind of going back over it if I can make it better once I unlock more recipes. But there's some very creative people out there. There's some very fascinating usages of islands out there. So the immersion is definitely there. You can definitely get into it. You can definitely pour into it. You can definitely spend a lot of time in this game too. It's not the perfect immersion because, once again, you are talking to animals. Nook, one of the major characters, he's like a raccoon. You also have, it's Animal Crossing for a reason, so all of the major characters that come to your island and become residents are animals. You're the only human being there. So it's not the perfect immersive game. It's not a role-playing game that you can really dive yourself into. It's not a character that you're going to make yourself look exactly like that character in the game, or like yourself, or how you like to portray yourself. So the immersion's not perfect, but it definitely earns an above average just because of how entertaining the game is, how rewarding it is when you actually do start to terraform and make your home, make the yard, all that kind of stuff your own, and kind of put your own spin on it, put your own creative fashion on it. The next category is graphics. Now this one definitely did hurt a little bit, and Nintendo's always on the lower scale when it comes to graphics. I'm not necessarily talking about pixelation or quality of graphics, because obviously the Switch can get up to high definition with 1080p, but what I'm talking about is the cartoonish nature of the video game. If you're really, really into graphics and you need everything to look real, everything to look as good as it possibly can, while the clarity is there with this game because there is some finite details and items that you can build, the style is not the fanciest out there. It's definitely probably maybe a decade behind on the style. It's definitely clear and it's crisp, and it's not ugly by any means, but it's definitely a Nintendo style. And what I mean by that is you can take almost any of their major titles, Zelda, Pokemon, anything that Nintendo really gets into, Mario, none of it's going to be super realistic like what Xbox, PlayStation, or PC would do with their games or their major titles, but it's their own style. It's their cartoonish spin. So I give it an average 7 out of 10 for the clarity of it. There is that cartoonish spin, so it's just kind of to each their own. You definitely get into it, and I definitely appreciate the game for what it is, but an average score, 7 out of 10 for that category is what I gave it. Next category is entertainment. This game is decently entertaining. It does, however, get repetitive. The game forces you, obviously you can bypass this by changing the time and date on your Switch, but the game basically forces you to take a break from itself by just running out of things to do. Each day, usually the resources will reset themselves. The wood will be able to be recollected out of trees. Every couple of days, fruit will come back on your trees. Every single day, the store will have new items to sell, so on and so forth. Another thing is there's fossils in the ground. Those things will reappear after the next day once you've collected and gone through your island once. So definitely there's a point in the game where you're just grinding for the sake of grinding, and there's not really much you can do that isn't just either adding to your own creative, terraforming the island, which that can take endless amount of hours depending on how creative and detailed you want to get. But there is a point where your input is no longer recognized due to the fact that you're not getting the same resources back out of it. So the game does put you at a point to where you need to kind of put the game down. Once you put the game down and then you come back the next day, all the resources are back up again, which is really nice. The main thing is that I think what they're trying to do is, pace the game out, because whenever you're building, it takes usually a day to build the structure. So if I have an add-on on my house, I can purchase that or pay it off on day one, but then I have to wait till day 2 for them to actually see the fruits of the payoff. Same thing with anything that you're building within the island, any structures for any other residents, that also takes a full day, as long as you've met the requirements before. Same thing with any kind of bridges or scaling structures. That also takes a day. So the game definitely works in real time and kind of forces you to pace yourself, which I thought was an interesting mechanic, honestly, because you could probably push through this game and really, really burn out through a lot of its content if this pacing structure wasn't implemented. It also gives a realism to the game, too, that you've put days and weeks and months into terraforming this island rather than just doing it in a couple of days because you've pushed through and grinded all the money and the resources enough to actually build these structures, and then you just bypass the time requirements. So it's definitely an interesting structure in the game. I personally enjoy it. I like that it makes you pace out. So it's definitely a very entertaining game. The next category is content. Speaking of the pacing, the content I gave here another 8 out of 10 just because it does get repetitive, unfortunately. There's a lot of different structures and a lot of different recipes that you can learn. There's a lot of different items that you can gather and put on your island, but eventually it's pretty much the same thing. The currency in the game is called bells or Nook Miles. Those are two different types of currencies. Bells is basically your cash. Nook Miles is basically a specific currency for Nook only, which is the main guy that owns the island. So basically, you sell resources that you collect on the island, grow, and produce back to Nook's children, and they run the shop. And you get bells back for that, which is the currency of that universe. So all you're basically doing is repeating that cycle, collecting resources, selling it for an amount, taking that amount, paying back Nook. So it's just a constant cycle to where it does get repetitive. So the content there is decent enough that it gives you the vastness of creativity. Like I said, I've seen a lot of videos out there to where people are making amazing towns and amazing little cities and replicating older games or other games because through their creativity, which I can't even begin to understand where they started with that. So the creativeness, the scope and capacity is there within content. I just don't like how repetitive the content is. Pretty much the only way of getting resources is through fruit, basically through farming, which is fruit, the wood from the trees. You can dig up items, which is usually in the form of natural resources like iron, gold, things like that, clay, rock. You can also dig up dinosaur bones. You can collect bugs, and you can fish. Those are pretty much the main categories of how you make currency and what's valuable in the game. So once you've done all that once or a couple times, it's pretty much just rinse and repeat. The cool thing, though, is that it does seem like they're going to add seasonal effects to the game. That we just got through the egg phase for Easter. So it does look like there's going to be some different types of elements that they'll input through the months to come. So that'll kind of break up the monotony, which is kind of nice as well. Last category for my 5 traditional categories, then we'll hit the bonus round, which is gameplay is the last one. Gameplay I define as the ability to control the character, the fluidity of the movements, the balancing of the game in general, making sure that I'm not glitching when I'm playing the game, that it's not frustrating to play. Because gameplay, in my opinion, is very important because it can break other categories. Definitely breaks entertainment because if I can't control the character, it just gets frustrating and I don't want to play, so it's not fun anymore. And if I can't control the character, or if the character's constantly clipping or something like that, it breaks immersion and hurts graphics. So gameplay is very important as well. I think they did a really good job in controlling this character. There's not much the character can do. I mean, obviously, it's pretty much on a 2D linear platform. You can go up, down, left, or right, and then obviously diagonal as well. But you can't really jump upwards. There's not really much reason to. You can use scaffolding to go to different levels of your island. But that's also compensated by scaling steps that you'll eventually be able to build in the game. So the movement is it's simple enough that it doesn't. There's not really much room for error in the first place. I've never had an issue of not being able to control the character well, not being able to go to where I want the character to go to. Sometimes the camera is a little bit rough because there's only 2 points of the camera that'll shift up and down. You can get a slightly more aerial view, and then you can get a horizontal landscape view if you go down. So sometimes if you plant trees too close to each other, even with the vertical aerial view, you can't really see what drops. You can kind of just guess where it is, and then you just press the pickup button or the interaction button. So that's a little bit of an issue with gameplay. But other than that, it was a very smooth game. I also gave that an 8 out of 10 to where it's above average, but it's nothing great because there's no major mechanics that make the game really groundbreaking. It's pretty much just walking around and picking up stuff. And then you have tools that you can use to interact with the terraforming of the island. So definitely an above average score on that one. So moving along, basically the 5 categories were immersion, graphics, entertainment, content, and gameplay. So what I do is with those individual scores that I just mentioned, I add them all up and then divide by 5. So the total score for the game based on those 5 categories is a 7.8 out of 10. So just below an above average score. I feel like this is pretty accurate for how I felt for the game. The game is definitely fun. I would definitely get it. If you're into sandboxing, if you're into a game that has really no storyline, it has a little bit of a storyline, but it's not something that you need to really pay attention to. Or if you like games that just let you be creative and do your own thing. Like I said before, it's literally the epitome of a sandbox game, pretty much Sims mixed with Minecraft. Then you'll love this game, I think. It's definitely a great game for the Switch. If you're on the go, if you're mobile, you can take this game just to burn time because there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of creative outlets. There's a lot of grunt work, like grinding work, chore work to get the island up to par and then to maintain it as well. There's weeds in the game, so those weeds will grow back if you're not diligently pulling them out. There's also, things that pop up in the ground and things like that you have to dig out and all that kind of stuff. So if you're not diligent and keeping up with the game, it can definitely pile up as well. So it's definitely a time burner, if nothing else, a creative time burner at that. So I think a 7.8 is a pretty solid score, just because this game's not really groundbreaking. It's more of a new age time burner. It's decent, but it's nothing spectacular. And then for my last bonus category that I like to do for the video reviews is the value of the game. And what I mean by that is how much this game would be basically a no-brainer to buy if you get a decent enough discount. Some games are worth the $60 price point. I definitely have run into a couple games to where I am totally glad and satisfied that I paid the full $60 to buy the game. I have no problems with that. But this game is definitely not it. I did get this game for a little bit cheaper. I got this game for $50 as opposed to $60. So that was helpful for sure. I think this game is probably worth $40 to $45, somewhere in that bracket. You can definitely push it to $50. I don't think that I got ripped off by any means pushing it to $50. It definitely has a lot of content. I'm still playing the game. I still usually log in every single day and in the morning and check things out and make sure that my island's up to date. But I can definitely see myself shelving this game very soon. I think once I get out of the game what I wanted to get out, I can definitely see myself shelving this game and then putting it away and then probably never coming back to it. I don't see it replacing my staple games for the Switch. Usually I'm playing Super Smash Brothers or Pokemon is the big game that I really like for Nintendo and the handheld consoles. So it's probably not going to replace any staple that I already have, but it's a fun game. It's a decent game. Definitely above average overall as the totality of it, looking at a wide scale view of it. But nothing to get too excited about. So definitely around the $40 price point. If you can get it for that, I think it's worth a buy at that point. Other than that, it's a great game. There's nothing really I have that's too against it other than what I mentioned. But I definitely think that if you're into sandboxes by any means, it's a good thing to add to your collection for sure. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, you can visit my website for more in-depth reviews, especially this one as well. Please leave a comment for any other things that I may have missed, or any other games you'd like to see me review. As always, keep on playing and have a great day.